Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mohamed Ashour from the Saudi host team at YEA. This session will be moderated by Mr. Alex Gill and with titled Social Entrepreneurship as a Key to Sustainable Development. Mr. Alex, you have the floor.
Great, thanks very much, Mohamed. And I'd like to welcome our panel. You're at the panel on social entrepreneurship and the relationship with sustainable development. I've been a social entrepreneur for 20 years. I've worked on 6 different social startups or scale-ups, and I also set up Canada's largest social enterprise incubator, which currently hosts about 35 different startups. So I'm honored to be moderating this discussion because we've got some very accomplished people around the call who are going to be able to share their experiences with us. Now, we've got a large panel today, so in a relatively short amount of time, and I want to make sure we hear from everybody around the panel so that we have a good discussion. So I'm going to start by framing the discussion and talking about the relationship between social enterprise and sustainability. And then I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So we've essentially got a continuum where social enterprise, we have pure play enterprises, for-profit, non-profit, whatever you want to call them, on one side of the equation, and they're focused on core social issues. And then as you kind of move across the spectrum of businesses, you've got some businesses over on the other side that are traditional for-profit businesses, but they want to become more social and want to become more sustainable. And there's a whole bunch of hybrid models that are in between those two. And the neat thing we've got on this panel today is we've got representatives who are essentially from different places in that ecosystem. We have people who are doing pure play social startups. We have people who are in the funding business, people who are consulting and talking to all these different things. We have people who are trying to work with governments to create more social entrepreneurs. So that's a very broad spectrum that we have across this panel. Now, we've also got 7 people. So the thing I'll remind everybody is often when you have a shorter amount of time, if you say to somebody, tell me about yourself, and it's 10 minutes, all of a sudden, if 7 people take 10 minutes, our entire time is up. So I'm going to ask our panelists to kind of make sure their comments are focused. And we're going to start with a general question and a general intro. Then we're just going to try to draw out some of the conversation and some of the very interesting things that people are doing. So I'm going to start by asking our panelists in alphabetical order to describe what their business or organization does with respect to social issues or sustainability. And in no more than 3 or 4 sentences, talk about where you fit on that broad social enterprise and sustainability continuum, and then answer an initial question. From your perspective, what's the biggest challenge we face right now in the overall field of sustainability and social impact? And Mohamed Alarify, we're going to start with you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, whatever part of the world you're from. So my name is Mohamed Alarify. I work for the Small and Medium Enterprises General Authority in Saudi. My role is, you rightly positioned, Alex, where there is the typical traditional businesses that are for-profit on one side, and then there is the NGO on the other side. So our role in the SME Authority is to create social entrepreneurship or social enterprises that leverage commercial methods to address social needs in a socially innovative manner and sustainable, financially sustainable. So that's our role.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm wondering about the first question. Well, what do you think the biggest thing is that we need to deal with in social enterprise and sustainability right now?
I think the main thing is to build that network of social enterprises, and where people buy social, people sell social, as well as what we lack is the awareness and education, which is also, and the mindset that needs to be developed from the ground up.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to turn to Mohamed Ashour. We're going in alphabetical order from Athar Consultancy. Mohamed, could you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do, and then address the question that we just began with?
Sure. This is Mohamed Ashour, General Manager and Senior Consultant in Sustainability and Impact at Athar Consultancy. Well, the main role that we do at Athar is try to, as a consultancy, try to support entities wherever they are, whoever they are, to build sustainably structured programs, initiatives, and structures when it comes to community development, social impact, social responsibility, and to sustainability as a whole and alignment with SDGs. We also help them and support them to actually reach the SDGs of 2030 and the Saudi Vision 2030. So our work is focused with the NGOs at first and expands to the private and public sector to create that ecosystem to be sustainable, involving all stakeholders, of course.
So very cool. And your thoughts on the biggest challenge we're facing in social enterprise and sustainability right now?
Well, I believe that it differs from different parts of the world, but the main challenge is awareness. I think people from all sectors and stakeholders from different categories need to empower and encourage social enterprises, because that's going to be the engine driving and the catalyst driving a lot of initiatives moving forward. So awareness and maturity of the business are key to actually creating that sustainable practice and having it moving forward.
Great, thanks very much. We're going to turn to Aurélie Billat from Kairos in Paris. Aurélie?
Yes, nice to meet you. So my role is to help all the companies to become, to enter in the RSE era. Actually, I'm a consultant, so I know a lot about all the social and sustainable questions. The reason is that I have my own agency, which is a design agency specialized in eco-conceptions. So every day we try with the teams to build schools, offices, with the same concern and the same aim to answer the CSR strategies of all the big companies we are working for. So actually, I was just talking about the last project we had, which is called the Resilient School, and actually in a tough context as the one we are facing at this stage, this is the most relevant project I want to focus on, but I will go further if you want to after that.
Okay. And your thoughts on the biggest challenge we're facing when it comes to social enterprise and sustainability?
The biggest challenge to me is actually, I know that when we are experiencing a big crisis, people think that everybody will have in mind that a change is needed. But once you have passed the crisis, then the things turn to be what they used to be. So if we don't manage to find the right arguments and the right way to be really optimistic and to show that sustainability is not only something annoying or something not very exciting, we will fail. I mean, we have to show people that they can keep on with enjoying themselves and becoming real sustainable ambassadors at the same time.
Interesting. Steph Limage from Limage Media Group. You're joining us from Vancouver today. It's still very early in Vancouver. Tell us how you fit within this overall social enterprise realm.
Good morning, everyone. It is 7 a.m. here, so it's not too bad. Sorry about those technical difficulties, and I'm happy to see everybody. So my name is Steph. I'm a social entrepreneur with an international background in media, film production, humanitarianism, human rights and law, and just getting a little feedback on your mic there from Paris, if you don't mind muting.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Aurélie, if you could mute your mic. We're getting a bit of feedback from your mic.
Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of several companies and media properties within our media group, and that includes an incorporated not-for-profit organization. And we produce international social impact and media mentorship programs. I started my work doing grassroots arts outreach at age 23 in Canada's poorest postal code here in the downtown east side. And then I moved to Haiti for half a decade, where I learned international humanitarian architecture and started investing in human capital. So I believe in using business and innovation as a way to create positive social change. And I want to leave the earth and humanity in better condition than when I arrived on it.
Okay. So same question as everybody else. What's the biggest priority we've got right now in social enterprise and sustainability?
We need to take action. We don't need to have more panels. We need to walk away from this and look at our business models and say, you know what am I doing that I could upgrade so that this model could be more relevant for all of the social issues that we're facing. You know, we're dealing with various crises in a simultaneous fashion that are affecting all of us. So we've got pandemics, we've got climate change, we've got an economic crisis. So all of us are capable of affecting change. So just leaving it up to a few clusters of people to take care of it really isn't going to work anymore. It's like wearing a suit from 1979 and walking down the street today and being like, check out my suit, guys. This is an awesome suit. And they're like, nobody, like, it's not 1979 anymore. You know, you need to get a new suit. So we don't need to throw out the original governance structure. We just need to add some new modules, upgrade it, but the modules that will work in Canada aren't going to work in Saudi Arabia. They're not going to work in Turkey. So what we're going to need to do is just adopt those models to suit our cultural landscapes. So we really just need to take action. Like, we don't need to talk about it anymore. As far as
I'm hearing action, but consciousness of the context in which it's happening.
Yeah, just get her done. New playbook.
Just get her done.
Yeah.
Oliver in the UK, your thoughts on this? Could you introduce yourself and maybe ponder a bit on the question?
Of course. I'm Oliver Mochizuki. I'm the CEO of a funding and investment company in the UK. I also head up Trillion, which is our impact investment arm, which is focused on connecting investors, both private and institutional, with large-scale renewable energy projects, infrastructure, housing. So we sit in between capital and companies and effectively bring them together. In terms of the biggest challenge that we face from a financial and sort of funding standpoint, for us, the biggest challenge is the funding gap. So to meet the UN SDGs by 2030, we need about $7 trillion a year to be invested. Currently, we're putting in about $3 trillion. So there's a very large shortfall that every year we don't bridge that funding gap, it gets harder and harder. And just to sort of mirror what Steph said, you know, we're very much of the opinion that the time for talk is over and the time for action is now. So that's our core focus. I'm also a family office advisor, and I work with a lot of different private families, lots of different funds, and there seems to be a real appetite to fund impact investment. So that's heartening, at least.
Two people echoing the call for action, not words. I'm going to throw to Fatima Montiel in Mexico. Fatima, a quick introduction and your take on the question.
Thank you, Alex. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Fatima Montiel. I'm the National President of Young Entrepreneurs in Mexico. And I'm really involved in education. Sophia is a team of education that helps students to...
Could you bring your mic closer to your mouth, Fatima?
Yeah, of course, Alex. If that works
Beautiful.
better. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we provide the teachers with the virtual tools that allows them to connect with the cognitive and social emotional aspect. I understand that the education, we need education. We need to get involved in high school. We need to get involved in middle and elementary schools to make the children understand that they can resolve problems and they are intelligent and they can come with the gamification, with technology, with connections. And I guess that's what we have to do, more actions, but understand that the education will resolve these problems with young entrepreneurs.
Okay. And thank you, Fatima. For those who might have lost some of those words in the audio issue, Fatima was talking about connective tools for education that kind of essentially empower children to understand how they can resolve problems. So
Yes.
very interesting lead into our final introduction, Sara Sawwaf. Sara, could you tell us a little bit about what you do and your thoughts on the question?
Hi, so I'm a founder of iAnimations, and we create edutainment content for young children through animations, apps, and books rooted in universal values that promote community-based efforts, accountability, gratitude, and respecting the environment. We're developing educational activities and curriculums around our content, and we'll partner with schools and NGOs as one of our distribution channels. We look to measure our social impact with our customers through our content and gamification in the future. A second thing is, as a social business, one of our goals is to hire large teams to co-create. And we're looking at ways to impact youth through employment and empower them by giving them more access to jobs in this space to create content around our themes. And I think the biggest challenge is the lack of understanding by investors of patient capital. Patient capital is required to be able to grow a startup that has both social accountability as well as financial accountability. And most investors in the Arab world are still not open to patient capital.
That's interesting. Actually, I'm gonna pursue that as a question that I'll throw to Oliver, but then I'd love to bring other people in on that one. We often run into a lot of different themes in social change. One is around awareness, and I'll touch base with our Saudi friends on that in a minute. But the other is also around how does the money suit the need? And Oliver, you're kind of right in the middle of that. I wonder if you could give your perspective on how we address that. That a lot of social innovators are saying, I just need the money to do this, but there's a gulf with investors who look at it and say, I'm not quite sure how I play a role here.
Well, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is the early stage development funding. So whether it's pre-feasibility or a more in-depth feasibility study into a project, we find that $1 to $3 million can be the hardest piece of money to secure, even more difficult than large-scale investment. There's probably $6 trillion on the American side alone from the top 10 investor banks and groups. But that's a minimum of $50 million, right? So how do you get a project funded in the early stage of its development? And the answer to that is you've got to have investors that are willing to take a risk. It's actually my belief that in the not too distant future, all companies and investments will be judged by the benefit from a social and environmental position. I think that's mirrored by BlackRock, and we're seeing that being picked up now by American investors, Chinese investors. So there's no easy answer to it, but you have to be able to take more risks. And we have to have more green bonds. We have to have more funding at the right time and at the earliest stage, for sure.
Okay, so Sarah's talking about patient capital, so not looking for the immediate return. You're talking about a diversity of different funding sources that depending on where the innovator is, they can access. And you're also, I hear, mentioning scale, right?
Yeah, there's different types of funding needed at different stages. So we began life in crowdfunding, and we've done a lot of work with homeless projects, refugee support, different rights issues, and sometimes just getting that early stage little bit of money to get started can be the key. And when I began working in social enterprise, there was a business or a charity. There was nothing in the middle. So I think that moving forward, we're going to have to deploy dozens of types of funding to meet the need.
Interesting. And then that leads us to some of the people who are on the front lines of getting their enterprise running. I'll throw to Aurélie and then to Steph and then to Fatima and back to Sara. What are you running into when it comes to, you've all got very interesting, powerful ideas about how change happens. Oliver's saying, oh, well, there's a whole funding side over there that needs to be connected in. Is funding the main barrier? Or are there other things you're running into where you think, okay, this is something a little more salient? And I'll start with Aurélie. What do you think of this equation? Oh, sorry, Aurélie, you're on mute.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah, funding is a barrier. It's the first barrier, of course, because if we talk about big projects with long-term, midterm, long-term goals to achieve a real results, we need to be sponsored now by investors that give. That invest and that believe that the idea is really good and valuable. And I would say this is a point which is very difficult to achieve because of when we talk about education, it's very linked to, in my case, it's very linked to the states, and it's difficult for them to not to discriminate one project from another. Otherwise, you can go to private schools, but it's different as well because they have less money. And if you want your project to be strong enough, you have to do both. I mean, public and private. So I'm talking France because I know the French system much more than the others. But of course, what we need to start with is a private investor at the first stage. Actually, I'm more or less discussing with one which could be very, very interested. They have many businesses and they have, assets all over the country, and we could start with them to at least to test one concept, and then to go ahead with that.
So the traditional, we're going to pilot, produce results, and maybe leverage additional investment.
Correct.
Okay, so our other frontline entrepreneurs. I'll start with Steph and then talk to Fatima and Sara. Aurélie outlining an interesting path that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have heard. Is money the main barrier here, or are there other things that you think you're running into?
I think if you focus on money, it becomes a barrier. I think if you focus on the work and you find the resources by being an entrepreneur, by bootstrapping, doing some side hustle consulting, using that to fund your R&D so that you can get your case study, because the challenge is always trying to iterate a concept to people who don't understand the framework that you're working in. You know, so it's like you're talking about spaceships and people are driving old Volvos. And, you know, you need to be able to break it down into, you know, if you're talking to a numbers guy, you've got to talk numbers. You know, you need to make sense within a corporate law framework to be able to show people what's the ROI. Well, in 10 years, if we invest in this young man, he is not going to have as many health claims. He's not going to have, you know, as many challenges that he's going to be facing as a young adult, where he could potentially end up in incarcerated, which is going to just cost money again then too, right? So the longer term investment strategy at looking at the 10, 15, 20 years down the line, which isn't as attractive, but if you have built out specific case studies from the past and you've been documenting your work efficiently, then it's a no-brainer. But it's, I think, a matter of just having the confidence to believe that you can make that difference, and by having the confidence to create space in an ecosystem where it can be quite uncomfortable because people don't like the idea of having to change anything. So they'll reject you and they'll project all of their insecurities and all of their stuff on you. And so you just have to be this sounding board for everybody's, you know, psychological and socio and economic issues, and just keep trucking along, doing your thing and building out and trying to make the world a better place. Like, money's always going to be a challenge, but money is, it's not even real. You know, what is real is you and I, all of us here, and that we're sharing the same planet, and there's some problems on it. So we're intelligent people, let's fix them. It's not that complicated. If somebody has money, it's a tool. I have a camera, I give it to a boy to give him a job. It's a tool. So it's all how you use those tools. You can choose to use that tool to buy a nicer car and look good on Instagram, or you can buy a Toyota Yaris, you know, and then you can use your money to save, you know, and invest in your own projects. So I guess I look at it a bit differently.
Interesting. Fatima, your take on this, because as Steph's pointing out, a lot of entrepreneurs often fixate on the money when there are a lot of other options around them about growing their venture.
Yeah, of course. Like,
crowdfunding is a way that you can share your idea with people, and then they will invest in your idea. But there's a joint venture. For me, venture capital needs to get more involved in social enterprise. Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's better.
Better,
Yes.
thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience.
I was talking about the crowdfunding is a way that you can encourage people to come to help and resolve an idea. Joint venture is another way that you have a tool. You have some problems, but you can change a lot of these problems with joint venture. At the same time, venture capital needs to invest in this idea because the only way to reduce and help people is to make them to create more money. Even that for me, money is a tool, is a need, but you need more than just that tool. You need a team. You need to be focused and have a great team, and everyone needs to be an excellent expert of what they do. For me, crowdfunding is an international way of helping this idea, and way more than that, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to bring in our Saudi friends in a sec. But Sarah, you started this conversation off. Any final thoughts on being on the front lines, money, and the other things that you can work on?
So I think funding is important to increase the impact. Investors need to understand a double bottom line, measuring not just financials, but also the social impact. Alignment between the investor and the social entrepreneur is very important, and they need to understand that in the long run, social businesses do better.
Okay, thank you. So Mohamed Alarify and Mohamed Ashour, you guys are part of an ecosystem, a very dynamic, growing ecosystem in Saudi Arabia, where the individual problems that people are talking about, money, frontline experience, the awareness that you guys raised at the start, you're trying to address this on a very, very big scale, at a nationwide scale. So I'll start with Mohamed Alarify. You're trying to make change happen on a very, very big level. How's that going? Reflections on what you're hearing.
Definitely, Alex. So our focus is when building an ecosystem, we would consider that we are doing it from the bottom up, from scratch, where there are existing social enterprises, but we want to set a definition and then, or not a definition, and like a description. And then so we'll be able to contain it and build the network and the community. So we focus on 5 main dimensions. The first one is awareness and promotion, where it starts from school stages, from success stories, from different messages that we can do, hackathons, competitions, etc., just to raise the awareness. And then from the infrastructure, where we look at the legal structure, the platforms for the physical and virtual platforms for startups to start a social enterprise, such as incubators, accelerators, etc. And then we look at the funding, where we seek for products that are available in the ecosystem that provide funding for social enterprises. The awareness is there. The impact investment is a trending type of investment that's happening. And when we're not only looking for one type of funding, where we want to have the equity funding, the lending, as well as the grants, or in some cases, especially in the social, you'll find donations that can help start a sustainable business. The 4th dimension is the access and network, where we can help to build an ecosystem. We have to identify or provide access to data as our role as government, drive demand, build the networks, build the network from the buy side, from the corporates, from the government, where they can buy social. And the last dimension is training and mentorship. So once you've identified and driven that demand, to have successful social enterprises, you need to provide them with access to mentorship, training, so they can help fulfill this demand.
Okay, very interesting. Like this is a comprehensive approach to doing things. And Mohamed Ashour, I'm going to focus on what Mohamed Alarify talked about as the first stage, which is awareness, because you mentioned that in your first piece. In Canada, we say when you're younger, you can't be what you can't see. So exposing people to different ways of doing things and different paths and different models is kind of the beginning point for behavioral change and social change. I wonder if you could share your thoughts, because you're working on the front lines of this as well.
Yes, I believe that awareness is very crucial, because yet you don't want to only encourage social enterprises. You want to make the ecosystem accepted, and not accepted just as an enterprise, but accepted as an enterprise with access to social impact. And social impact is a very important aspect of the socioeconomic ecosystem. Raising awareness, as Mohamed Alarify mentioned, is one of the cornerstones, because you want people to have that knowledge enough to support the ecosystem with social enterprises, and you want them to accept that what companies present. In addition to entrepreneurs themselves with their innovative idea and their creativity to bring social aspects into the equation. It's not only about the money, not just that. It's also about creating a sustainable social impact that does not start with only the DNA at the early stages, but continues throughout the journey of that enterprise. And I believe awareness is that key, because once you get that awareness to the community that is the audience and the stakeholders and the customers, you also get it to those who enable the enterprise, whether they're stakeholders, employees, entrepreneurs, and so forth. And it's a pyramid. It should involve the community, the business sector, and the government, because you want laws that support social enterprises. You want laws that encourage social enterprises. Again, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that love to do something good for the community, but if the system does not host that kind of business, that's another issue. And if you have both of those set, and then you don't have the audience enough to encourage that, such as electric cars, for example. That's just on the top of my head. If you don't have the awareness in the community to actually go forward with that, then yet you'd not achieve the full circle to sustainability.
Interesting, and I'm going to pick up on the green consumer and the kind of the systemic factors that both of you guys have mentioned. If we have time, Steph, I know you were kind of waving there. Did you have a comment on the awareness issue?
Yeah. So, in terms of social impact investment, the challenge that I found, starting 10 years ago, was that we're expected to take on debt in order to solve problems that are affecting us all. And so entrepreneurs are told to solve problems, but if you're helping, humans who are in need, I don't feel that I should have to take on debt in order to do that. So that's where you have to get creative and make a hybrid model, and you create an NPO to be able to register for grants and whatnot. And then there's organizations like Futurepreneur, who are one of the founding members of the G20YA, and they provide seed money for entrepreneurs who are just starting out. And what they do is they assign you a mentor. It's mandatory to have that mentorship, and there's that education component. So with the social sector, if there was a loan that was associated to investing in human capital in that context, if someone was going to be taking on that type of vulnerability of debt in order to help individuals moving forward in other places, that mentorship is a really key component to be able to have someone to walk with you in terms of the accountability, to be able to see has there been an ROI, and being able to measure out all of those cadences, just like Sarah was saying, because social businesses do have that double bottom line. So you won't see the ROI in the camera you gave that boy right away. You'll see it when he's grown and he starts his own media company or becomes a famous photographer, and he uses that camera to be a passport out of poverty. So I think it's very exciting what's happening in Saudi Arabia. I feel that we should help insulate that process because the landscape is a blank canvas that we can paint to raise up that generation. And a majority of the population, according to what they're saying, is, you know, age 35, right?
I think it was 35 or under.
Yeah.
So very young population looking for opportunities, further to Sarah's business, to put values into action.
Yeah.
This is why I wish we had more time, because there's so many neat threads here. I wanted to pick up on the thing, both Mohamed Alarify and others had mentioned the idea of the buying, the kind of the pull of things into this, and the idea of the green or the sustainable consumer. And one of the things that we find challenging with the entrepreneurs in my incubator is often they have well, people should buy this. And our comeback to that is people rarely buy should. They buy value, they buy something that gives them something, but they don't buy something just because it's good for them. And I'm wondering if we can get the thoughts of the panel. And Aurélie, I think I'm going to start with you because you're very much in the branding space. The idea that consumers, the idea that the purchaser can help drive the transition to a more sustainable economy. Thoughts on that? Oh, sorry, Aurélie, you're on mute.
Definitely, the clients I have, they cannot go on with the traditional business as we used to do. For example, when I design a space for them, should it be a stand or a store or a school, and they cannot do it like we used to do 10 years ago. So now they are totally aware of this green concern, what we should call not green, but eco-concern feeling, which is a main driver for them, and they really want to have a corporate behavior. Actually, it's key for them to show the example, because they want to behave like in the big society, in the big firms, and actually most of the time, they take advantage for the experiences of these big companies. And as all the big companies from the CAC 40 are starting to show the example and to be more and more concerned and to avoid to have a poor idea, a poor image in terms of a social and sustainable capital. All the small companies are doing the same. I mean, it's not possible enough to ignore the cause.
So you've got individual consumers, and thank you for that. But then you've also got bigger set piece consumers. And Mohamed Alarify, you were talking about essentially purchasing on behalf of government being more ethical and more green. I'm going to bring Oliver in on this in a second because there's a money aspect to this. But I wonder if you could talk about the policy aspect, about how government policy can drive the adoption of more sustainable and more social things.
So from policy perspective, I think, especially in the social element, it's not something that you can enforce. You need to encourage. That's why we're saying awareness is very important across all the different dimensions. You need to encourage and educate, where buying social is good for you economically and socially. And one way we did, we took action in this regard, where we're trying to issue certificate for either social enterprises that has certain classification, because also you don't want to build a train that everyone wants to jump on and everyone is permitted without a ticket. No, you want to control where this is actually a social enterprise, where it generates revenue, sustainable, it has a sustainable business model, as well as it has as the revenue grows, the social impact grows, and it's built for a cause. So if we have that certification or authentication that this business is a social enterprise, later on you will identify what are their needs, and then you can drive the government policy making to serve those needs do any incentives or any government policies that can support that sector.
Thank you. And I'm going to bring Oliver in on this discussion too, because that's a good example of the role of government. You're talking about the role of large chunks of investment. So how do those two complement each other and work in conjunction with the green consumer and the idea of a sustainable consumer?
Sorry, I missed the start of the question. Could you just reframe that, Alex? Sorry.
Sure. We just had Mohamed Alarify talk about the role of government, green purchasing, the idea of government as a driver, and a very poignant point that you can't mandate that people are going to be ethical and social, but you can kind of help set winning conditions for it. The other half of that, in addition to the consumer, is the investor. So,
yes.
So talk to us a little about that.
Yeah, so on the investor side, we're actually seeing increasingly more corporate, very large corporates that have, their own investment arm, whether it's a VC arm or an investment holding company. They're very much behind the shift to funding impact investment. And I think a lot of that is driven by government initiatives. In the UK, we now have the foundations laid out for social enterprises to collaborate with both government and corporates. And whereas perhaps you could say, 10 years ago, there would be a lot of ticking the box. We build a playground in the local community. We sent 100 of our staff, to volunteer for a day, but it was really about ticking a box. Now we've been seeing, really substantial investment from corporates alongside public and private sector capital. And for us, that's what we need to see. We need to see a massive mobilization of private and institutional and government capital working together. We need to see blended finance options. We need to see a lot more corporations getting involved, and they're seeing the reality to their bottom line. Social products do well. I think we have a new generation coming through that look at what their grandparents did, perhaps the decisions they made in the past, and they want to choose a completely different route. So we have a whole new generation of consumers that if your company isn't ethical, they're not going to buy.
Interesting. That very much mirrors Aurélie's point. Fatima, I noticed you were nodding very vigorously during that piece. Anything you want to contribute?
I think the conscience that we need to. This microphone today was a mess. Okay.
Better.
That's better. So I think the main idea of conscious is that we need to get involved, the government, the universities. We need to get all of us involved in this, because in order that someone will take care of himself, like, you need to make people to understand that this is for all of us. It's not just for myself. We need to share value as an impact people that will take care of themselves. And that's part of what we all understand. I guess that in order to make the conscious and actions plan, we can resolve a lot of problems and sharing a lot of value, Alex, because if I understand, if I have a program, if someone has the money, we need to make everyone to work to make these solutions to be global.
Sure, and I'm just going to build on that, and I'm going to bring in Sara, because she's working very much in the front line of how do you get people to internalize values that, when expressed, make the world more social and make the world more progressive. And I'll share a quick anecdote, but then Sara, I'd love your take on, is it possible to move the dial on making people more conscious and more ethical? I do a thing with one of the universities here where they bring in people who come from formerly communist countries to learn how to do social. And it's kind of ironic, we're telling people who used to be socialists how to do social stuff. But one of the questions they have when we explain about the vast array of people who are doing social enterprise, who are volunteering in their community, who are working through their faith group or their community organization and volunteering their time, the question I get every time I talk to those groups, who pays these people? Why do they do it? Because they don't have the internal value software that says, I should help people. As Mohamed Ashour said about earlier about during Ramadan, there's a tradition of giving, there's a tradition of helping the less fortunate. You're on the front lines of that. Is it possible to make people more ethical through engaging them early?
So we're doing what it takes to get customers to think environmentally and raising awareness at a very young age through our series, through our content, and the parents, children, and schools can learn from that. But getting back to your question, we're a for-profit, but social impact is the drive. It's important for us to also have, again, that double bottom line in order for us to foresee growth, global growth. It needs to intensify the stakeholders to keep it going.
Okay. Interesting. I wonder if anybody else wants to weigh in on this. So the idea is the software that we are running internally, when expressed externally, becomes a more just world and becomes a more social world. But can we really give people software upgrades? Can we actually look to people to be more? Mohamed Alarify is smiling at this one. What do you think? You're trying to do a version of this on a countrywide scale.
I think the future generation. We're looking at this subject like in a very long and a generation to generation change. I think the future generation is going to do that for us. The cautiousness, the awareness, in the future generation is there, and I think in not too long that will be the market where everyone who's even the corporates, the governments who wants to access this market will have to adjust and their configuration to meet their needs, which will be socially cautious.
Very interesting. And I'm looking at Mohamed Ashour, and I'm also looking at the clock in my computer. I know that you've given us 30 minutes and we're already at 40. I just wanted to do a quick time check. Should we begin to wrap up? Sorry, Mohamed, you're on mute.
I think we can have our closing remarks right now. That's doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would love to add something regarding what Mohamed and the fellow panelists said. I believe, yes, social impact is the drive and should always be the drive. And it's all about the mentoring, as mentioned earlier. Once you have that person with the right drive to create social impact, and you empower him or her with the right tools to be an entrepreneur, to create ideas, to be innovative, to package products, I think we got it sorted out from two segments, the private and the non-profit. Once we have that humanitarian outside thinking embedded within the baseline or the code of the business, then we have it done. Part of what we do, for example, at Athar is create a sustainable practice into companies where we get the buy-in for CSR and initiatives and social responsibility, corporate volunteering, and I try to embed it in 20, 30, 40, 50 years old companies that are huge. But once we do an investment like this with potentially very growing companies that have the social motive and that have the idea and have the motivation, and they lack funding, for example, or they lack empowerment or training, that's a way less expensive investment if we look at it from a financial point of view, but creating a huger impact, a bigger impact. And that's what should be the motive. And for example, in Saudi Arabia, and I believe Mohamed already, Alarify covered this, that the way we look at it is just a business. It's not a train that everyone should be jumping into. It's not a certificate that you hang on your store or office. It's what you stand for, the DNA that we try to build in you. And we're learning from mistakes from the past. We're learning from exposure to different practices. And that's where we try to customize it and have people actually get the value that fits their need.
So it's always a good sign of a conversation when there's so much more you want to talk about when you get to the end of the time. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly go in the order that people are on my screen because we are up against time. We've had a very bleak several months of COVID and political developments globally and things. People could be feeling a little beaten down. You guys are on the front lines. What's one thing you're hopeful for about right now? One sentence about what you're hopeful about. Mohamed Alarify, you're on the top left of my screen. I'm going to start with you.
Well, first, I hope that this the COVID-19 goes over and everything goes back to normal. But from social entrepreneurship perspective, I hope to see this as a leading industry. I hope to see it as from investment side, from GDP contribution, from job creation. So that's our objective, and that's what we hope for.
Fantastic. Oliver, one sentence. What's making you hopeful right now?
I'm incredibly hopeful by all the young entrepreneurs that I mentor and I talk to and I work with. So I really just want to say a message to all of the youth entrepreneurs at the summit. Be bold, be ambitious, and remember, anything is possible.
Thank you. Steph Limage, one sentence. What's making you hopeful right now?
The sense of community that I've seen within the NGO and NPO world for coordinated community response is something that you would see after a humanitarian disaster in a specific country, but it's broader because it's affecting all of us. So the ability for us all to work together and to unify, to create umbrellas, I feel is a really great way to move forward, because if we stay in a silo alone, you can't impact as many lives. You can't change systemic oppression and reverse inequalities. So it's been such a beautiful experience to see how other people have essentially been forced to work together, whether they liked it or not, and be able to move forward in a new capacity by, joining and merging our resources. And that doesn't necessarily mean financial, but it could be human resources and knowledge.
Sure.
That the element of humility, I feel, is and compassion is extraordinary that we've all had for each other. It's brought us together.
Thank you. Thank you. Sara Sawwaf, one sentence. What are you hopeful for right now?
I'm hopeful for continuous awareness and, as Steph says, the community feel, and that we all remain vigilant and thoughtful to be able to address future social and environmental challenges together.
Great, thank you. Our final two, Fatima and then Aurélie. Fatima, one thing that's making you hopeful right now?
An opportunity to connect. This is a global way of helping each other. So let's connect everyone.
Connection, thank you. Finally, Aurélie, one thing you're hopeful for right now?
Definitely a connection as well. So grateful for having been connected to so many people who share the same values and who are totally in line with the goals we have. That I think this is the main reason to be enthusiastic and positive for the next decades.
Awesome, thank you very much. And Mohamed Ashour, I know you started everything with your comments, but one quick sentence. What are you hopeful for?
Well, I'm hoping that social entrepreneurship would be the drive for the young entrepreneurs. I can see them watching through the summit, and I hope this will give them a highlight into encouraging them to do so as the last word of this panel. Thank you so much, guys.
Fantastic. I want to thank all of our panelists. It's always great to meet so many accomplished people who are doing such great things. Before we came on, we said, wouldn't it be great if we had a world where we didn't have to do panels like this, where everybody was social and everybody was sustainable? But until that day happens, it's really reassuring to know we have people like you who are still working on this every day. So on behalf of the G20YEA and our Saudi hosts, thank you for doing this. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.